Do you have personal faith, complete faith, in Tom Watson as your deputy leader?
He's elected deputy leader. He's brilliant at speaking out on the need for reforming the media, which I'm sure you'd be strongly in favour of, as somebody that wants to see plurality in the media.
And you are personally happy for him to carry on as your deputy leader?
I get on absolutely fine with Tom.
When did you know?
We talk frequently on many matters, including the media and health.
When did you know that there was a move against him at the NEC?
It wasn't a move against him specifically. What it was concerns about the role of deputy leader, and I was not aware that the particular motion was going to be moved at that time, but I knew there were people discussing options, and so when I heard of this, I then proposed a statement to the National Executive yesterday, which I put myself, which was that we should have a consultation about having two deputy leaders in the future, which would reflect gender and hopefully ethnic balance within our society as a way of the party being consulted. Because I don't think we should make rule changes on a whim. I think they should be debated, discussed, and there should be proper notice given of them. So I was just making sure there was a proper democratic process. My whole mission has been to democratise the Labour Party.
So when did you know this move was being made?
I knew there was discussions going on about the role of deputy leader. I did not know that that particular motion was going to be put at that time.
Did you tell Tom Watson about it? Because he has described this as a drive-by shooting.
Very strange language. I have not discussed this issue with Tom Watson for a few days, no, so I think that's very... Well, let's put it this way. We've now got a position which I'm very happy with, and the NEC overwhelmingly backed was my proposal that we have a consultation discussion about electing deputy leaders in the future, which reflect the diversity of our society.
Before we got to this stage, what exactly did you know about the NEC motion that related to Tom Watson?
I didn't.
And when? Nothing?
Listen, I didn't know a motion was going to be put. I knew that there were people, because you've only got to read it on Labour List and everywhere else, who were concerned about the position of having one deputy, and they thought there ought to be a diversity in our elected positions within the party. And so that there's no secret about that discussion. It's there every day on the social media.
At that meeting, two of your close allies, Rebecca Long-Bailey and Diane Abbott, voted to get rid of Tom Watson as your deputy leader. Have you spoken to them about that and asked them why they did that?
What they've now done is...
now, but then...
Well... They supported that motion, I believe. I wasn't in the meeting. They strongly supported, indeed, there was a plethora of hands went up to second the proposals that I put yesterday morning to put the whole issue to bed for this conference so we can get on with the important issues of austerity and all the policy. Because actually Andrew, people have come to Brighton to discuss politics.
They certainly have, but on the eve of that discussion of politics, there was a move to get rid of your deputy leader.
There was a move that didn't happen, didn't work, and I intervened to make sure we have an open, democratic discussion about the structures of our party, and that is where we're at.
Let's be honest, there is a policy split on all sorts of issues between you and Tom Watson, and two of your closest allies voted to get rid of Tom Watson. That's what's really going on here. When it comes to Brexit and some other things, you and Tom Watson don't see eye to eye, do you?
Listen, I have debates the whole time with colleagues in the shadow cabinet, the Parliamentary Labour Party, and on the media about Brexit issues. There are views as to when one should hold a referendum. My view is that we should elect a Labour government that will be able to put reasonable offers.
I'm coming on to that.
I'm sure you are. Reasonable offers to the British people. This conference is actually about policy. It's about health. It's about housing. It's about education. It's about environment.
But
that's why all these people are here.
To stand back from that, two of the most senior members of the shadow cabinet went to the Labour's ruling NEC and voted to ditch the deputy leader of the Labour Party.
They voted for a rule change proposal which was not put through, was not finally agreed, and was replaced by my consultative document, which Diane Abbott, Becky Long-Bailey, and pretty well everyone else around the table, whatever their views on Brexit or anything else, supported.
If you didn't know about it, why not?
Well, I'm not all-seeing and all-knowing. I'd love to be.
All right, you are the leader of the party, and it is slightly strange. Can I ask you about another issue this morning, which is that your former head of policy, Andrew Fisher, announced that he is leaving at the end of the year. And in the course of that, he produced a memo, which has been helpfully leaked to the Sunday Times, you'll be pleased to see. And it says, "I no longer have faith that we will succeed." And he describes the rest of your team as having a lack of professionalism, competence, and human decency, and says he is sick of their blizzard of lies and excuses. Do you recognise those words? Have you seen that memo?
I've obviously seen the words that Andrew wrote, and I discussed them with him at some length immediately. And he is wanting to leave in order to spend time looking after his son and be with his wife and his family, because this is a very stressful and very full-on job. And he is working with us for the rest of this year. He will be here for the general election campaign. He is, as we speak,
He's downstairs.
He's indeed downstairs.
Yeah.
And we had a very convivial cup of coffee together this morning with everybody else in the senior team in my office. And so the idea that there's some kind of, I don't know what you're leading up to here.
Well,
I can kind of guess.
I'm literally not leading up to anything. I'm literally going to put you his words. A blizzard of lies and a lack of human decency. Why do you think he said that?
I think he said that because he was extremely distressed at that point about whatever was going on in discussions within the office at that moment. I would have thought similar memos fly around the BBC pretty well every day.
I doubt it. I haven't seen them.
Maybe, Andrew, even in your team.
I doubt it. I haven't seen them yet.
Are you not seeing and knowing?
I'm certainly not. Let me ask, more generally, there is a sense here that
Can we just deal with Andrew first?
Yeah, okay.
He is a great colleague, a great friend.
Wrote the 2017 manifesto.
Indeed. I've worked with Andrew for 15 years. When I was a backbencher and many other times. He's a great writer, he's a great thinker, and he's done a huge amount of work for the party. We get along absolutely very well. He's promised that whatever happens in the future, he'll be working with me on policy issues. We do, however, frequently argue about football. He supports Spurs.
Let me ask you again about what's gone through the NEC, because there's another motion which changes the rules about what happens if you stand down, either in opposition or in government as leader.
Or an untoward accident happens with a bus.
All of that stuff. Yeah. So now the NEC has a veto about who takes over. Prior to this, it would simply be the Deputy Leader, Tom Watson, would go into the job pro tem until you chose another leader. Now the NEC has a veto.
It's not a veto. They would have the power to appoint whoever the leader should be in the event of the leader being incapacitated, unable, or whatever unfortunate thing would have happened to the leader. It's not about me, it's about the party.
You've been highly critical of the Conservatives for foisting a Prime Minister, in your words, on the country through the votes of 150,000 Tory party members. But now we're proposing that 30 members of the NEC would be able to do the same thing in the case of a Labour government.
Interim leader pending an election of the new leader. Interim, get the word interim.
The interim is important, but if you are pro tem, the leader of the country, pro tem, the Prime Minister, you have huge influence about what happens next.
It could be for a very short period.
It could be, or it could be for a longer period. It seems a very small number of people to decide our Prime Minister.
There would have to be a Labour member of Parliament. There would obviously have to be a senior figure, and obviously would come from the Cabinet at the time.
Well, as you know very well, a lot of people here think that this is on the agenda now because you are going to stand down before too long as leader of the Labour Party. Can you give me a complete...
It's wishful thinking by some people.
Can you give
Probably yourself.
Let's answer that now. Can you give me a commitment? Tell all those people watching now that you will definitely be leader of the Labour Party into and after the next general election.
I'm taking the party into the general elections. I'm taking the party into general election to end austerity, to bring forward policies that bring about a better standard of living and better opportunities for people all across this country. I'm enjoying doing that. I'm campaigning all the time. I did 40 events during August alone, all around the country.
And if you become the Prime Minister of this country, are you going to are you going to serve as Prime Minister for a full term?
Of course.
You will. And that's a commitment.
Well, why wouldn't I?
Let's talk about one of the first things that you would want to do as a Labour Prime Minister.
I'm very surprised at this question, actually, Andrew. What are you trying to say?
It's of great interest who's Prime Minister.
I know it's a great interest who's Prime Minister, and I'm looking forward to the job.
Well, in that job, one of your first jobs, you've said, is to go to Brussels and negotiate a new Brexit deal. Can I ask you, in that context, is it your view that Britain is better off inside the European Union or better off long-term outside the Union? Which?
Depends on the agreement you have with the European Union outside. And
so we could be better off. We could be better off outside, therefore.
Listen, what I've tried to do all along is recognise the result of the referendum and respect it. That's what we said in our 2017 manifesto, which is why we voted before that to invoke Article 50 in, I think it was March 2017. We have consistently put forward what I believe to be a credible option, which is what we call the 5 pillars, which is the customs union, the trade relationship, protection, consumer, environmental, workers' rights, and of course the Good Friday Agreement and the peace process. We have discussed. Well, we've discussed those several times with Michel Barnier and others in the European Union and through the socialist bloc in the European Union, heads of other governments as well. I recognise the majority of Labour Party supporters and members support Remain and supported Remain, but a significant minority voted the other way. And I think, can I just finish this?
Let's play a very simple game.
No games. We're not playing games here. We're doing something very serious here. The very serious point I'm doing here is that the party and the people and media in this country should understand why people voted Leave, why those communities that had seen no investment, poor quality jobs, totally left behind, felt very angry and voted the way they did. Well, you keep saying agreed, but then too often,
that's very important.
Many people just dismiss the whole issue.
Let me come on to. So I am the game I was going to play. I'm Michel Barnier. You come to me with that list of things that you want from the negotiation. I give you everything you want. You get what's called Lex. You get the Labour version of a Brexit deal that you want. Are you then able to take that back to the country and campaign vigorously and enthusiastically for it?
If we get an agreement that fulfills the 5 points of saying, I've said all along, that would be a credible offer to put before the British people. What we're doing... I'm asking
you for more than that. I'm saying, would you campaign for it?
What we're also doing is making sure that no deal is taken off the table. Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, wants to take us over a cliff edge on no deal with all the problems that would cause. That is the priority today, and that is what we're focused on.
I'm really asking a very straightforward question here, which is, you get the deal you want. Do you then come back to the British people in a referendum and sell that deal?
We put both views to the British people.
Do you sell the deal?
We will put both views and say, look, this is the best deal we could get. This is the Remain and hopefully reform option. These are the choices before you. And so that is what we'll put forward.
With respect, the choice before you is staying completely neutral, staying out of this, which is what you seem to be saying, or actually saying this is the deal I, Jeremy Corbyn, negotiated, this is what you should vote for.
The other piece in the puzzle is the role of the Labour Party in this, and what we've said is that we would want to hold a consultation, a special conference of our party at the point we've got this offer from the EU, we've got this as a Remain, and hopefully reform option, because I do think even those that are strongly in favour of Remain will recognise the EU needs to have some reforms.
Okay, well, we have a Labour conference here which can take some of those decisions if it wants to. But I'm just asking you again, as leader of the Labour Party, and in this situation as Prime Minister, if you negotiate what you regard as a good Brexit deal with Brussels, do you then campaign for it or not?
Let's see what we get, and we'll put that final decision to the British people and make that decision at that time. At the moment...
I'm saying you've got the deal. You've got the deal.
Well, we don't know.
Congratulations, you've got the deal.
Thank you very much, but we don't know if we've got it yet.
Why can't you tell us?
Because I don't know if we've got it yet. We're gonna go back there and make sure that in future Britain has a trade relationship with Europe. We have dynamic relationship on rights. We do have all that trade relationships and, of course, the arrangements in Northern Ireland. These are crucial ones. What we've got is a government that's playing fast and loose with the Constitution and doing a smash-and-grab raid on our democracy.
It's just that I have asked you a very, very straightforward question, which I would have thought the answer is obvious, that if you go out and you negotiate the deal you want to negotiate, you get everything you want. Do you come back and tell the British people, vote for it?
We put that deal and say, this is the best deal on offer, this is the Remain option.
So you're staying, at the moment, you're staying neutral.
We will have a special conference to decide.
And you have said with some justice that you are the leader who straddles both sides and divide on Brexit. The problem with that, when it comes to the proposal that you make for a referendum, Remain in the EU or the Labour deal, is that for all those millions of people who want what they would regard as a clean break Brexit or a no-deal Brexit, their views don't matter to you.
Well, they do matter, obviously, but I also make it very clear that those that voted to leave the EU in 2016 were not actually told what would happen if they left, and were not told the consequences of a no-deal Brexit. Clearly, the government is very well aware of that, which is why they try to suppress the information in the Yellowhammer documents. I think the people should be told exactly what will happen. Michael Gove got up in Parliament and proposed employing extra security staff all down the M20 to control lorries. They're now searching for trains to bring medicines into Britain to get them in very quickly. They know just how disastrous much of this could be and how serious this is, and they've consistently tried to hide that information. It's the Labour opposition working, yes, with other parties, that's legislated to prevent that and also demanded effectively the publication of these documents.
By some measure, 90% of your party wants Labour to be an unequivocal Remain party. Emily Thornberry, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, says Labour should stop messing around and lead the Remain side of the argument. We don't know what's going to happen in this conference, but if this conference votes for Labour to be an unequivocal, clear, single-voiced Remain party, would you follow that vote?
Listen, I am leading the party. I'm proud to lead the party. I'm proud of the democracy of our party. And of course, I will go along with whatever decision the party comes to. But I just simply say, and I've said this to everybody, that please remember why people voted Leave, why people voted Remain. But also remember, there is more that unites all of those people over austerity, over investment, over education, over housing, over health, over a green industrial revolution than there is that divides them. And this conference is actually, yes, of course people are talking about Brexit. They're also discussing every other policy you've ever thought of with fantastic level of enthusiasm and excitement. You should enjoy it.
I enjoy every second of it, as always. Let me turn to another way of avoiding no deal. You spoke just now about the dangers of no deal and Yellowhammer and all that. One way of avoiding no deal is that if Boris Johnson, to general surprise, brings back an agreement from the EU and puts it to the House of Commons, is to vote that agreement through. There are probably about 40 Labour MPs who would back that kind of deal in order to avoid the chaos, as they see it, of no deal. What do you say to them?
Well, there's a slight problem with that hypothesis. He hasn't even put a proposal to Brussels.
Agreed, but he might well.
Well,
I'm saying if he brings back a deal, shouldn't Labour back that to avoid no deal?
That he became Prime Minister in July and said this was a very important and urgent issue, and here we are at the end of September, he still hasn't made a proposal. This is a very strange problem. I don't know.
Those are questions for him. The question for you is, should Labour MPs back a deal is the simple question.
Absolutely depends what the deal is.
So there might be...
I've no idea what deal he wants to bring back, but all my instincts are that Boris Johnson actually wants a no-deal exit from the European Union, which is why he has refused consistently to confirm that he will abide by what's called the EU Number 6 Act, which requires him to apply for an extension in the event of a no-deal looming up at the end of October.
This is a very, very difficult question for Labour MPs, which way to go. Would you allow them a free vote?
I would hope we could vote together as a party on this, and that is what I've tried to do all the way through. And indeed, when we put through the special law, the one I just referred to, we got 95% of Labour MPs supported it. And I tell you what, the party does want to come together, does want a general election, and does want to be able to defeat austerity and start changing the lives of people in this country.
Well, let's talk about the other huge news story in the week coming, which is prorogation and the Supreme Court judgment. Two things can happen. The Supreme Court can back Boris Johnson and the government's position and say the prorogation was legal. If they do that, there's lots of hints from number 10 that they would prorogue Parliament again throughout the rest of October. What does the Labour Party do in those circumstances?
We would obviously oppose that, but let's take it back a stage. The fact that the government, the Prime Minister, has been taken to the Supreme Court on his decision, it is his decision using the powers of the royal prerogative. The royal prerogative lies with the Prime Minister, is unprecedented for this length of dissolution of Parliament. We oppose that, obviously, in the House, and we would oppose it again. And I will be in discussions with the other opposition parties on what action we can take. If the Supreme Court, and it is an if, I don't know what the decision is going to be, if they decide that Parliament should be recalled, in other words, the advice he gave was wrong, then we would seek to take immediate action in Parliament to prevent him closing down Parliament all the way through to the 31st of October. So I would work with the other opposition parties, as we have up to now.
To be clear, if the judgment goes against Boris Johnson, you would expect the Speaker of the House of Commons, John Bercow, to recall Parliament immediately. In other words, in the week to come. So these Labour MPs up and down for your conference would go back to the House of Commons, the Tories would lose their confidence entirely, and the Commons would be returned.
The Commons should be recalled as if that is what the Supreme Court decides. And I hope we're in that position, because I want this Parliament, our Parliament, to be able to question the government. This is pretty strange behaviour when you've got major decisions coming up. The government, the Prime Minister, closes down Parliament to prevent any scrutiny or debate.
You mentioned policy. Let me ask you about two policy areas. Momentum, your supporters in the party want Britain to become carbon neutral by 2030. You disagree with that. Why?
I don't disagree with it. I hope we can achieve it. That's my point.
You're sceptical?
Well, I'm looking at all the science to do with it. I want us to become carbon neutral as quickly as we can. It also requires proper measurement of emissions, including emissions from aircraft and shipping, but also the effect of carbon emissions on goods that we import as opposed to just goods that we produce in this country. There has to be accurate, proper measurement of it. I'm utterly determined to get us to be in a zero emissions position, zero net emissions position, as quickly as possible. If it can be done by then, fine.
If you become Prime Minister, you know, every Prime Minister spends a large amount of time jetting all around the world to one conference after another. Can you make a pledge now that you, as Prime Minister, you would stop that? You would fly far less?
I fly as little as I can now. I take trains wherever I can all the time.
You do the same in government?
Absolutely, because I do think an example has to be set, but we also must include aviation and shipping in the measurements, because the biggest emissions are actually aircraft. But it does mean that, I mean, I'll give you an example.
Let me ask you about, we're running out of time. I just want to ask you about one other policy
What did you talk about? The alternatives, actually.
I want to ask you about one big policy area, which is Ofsted. You want to abolish Ofsted. Now, for a lot of parents, Ofsted is the national guarantor of standards in their schools. So why do you want to abolish it?
Because it is a very assertive form of investigation into a school. They turn up every few years, or sometimes more frequently than that, and do an exercise on that school and then make a decision about it. The levels of stress on the students and the teachers is absolutely enormous. What we want instead is a more frequent form of supportive investigation of schools and examination of them through HMI, Her Majesty's Inspectors of Schools, but also through local authorities. It's part of reinvigorating local education authorities to administer all schools within their community area. We also want to get rid of SATS testing at Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2, because there is no evidence it actually improves achievements for children. There's
stress on children.
The stress levels on children are absolutely phenomenal. So what we want is an education service that leaves no child behind and gets the best out of everyone. We don't achieve the best by threatening people. We are losing almost as many teachers as we're recruiting every year because the levels of stress they're under. Why is it young people do the job they really want to do, the job they love, and find after a couple of years they cannot cope with the levels of stress? We're losing brilliant people. I want to keep them in the profession.